This is Health UnaBASHed, broadcasting live on Healthcare Now Radio. Health UnaBASHed is a conversational platform where healthcare meets innovation. We engage top industry talent and dive into the heart of health and wellness from vision to business model to bring you the latest developments in health tech to promising AI applications, policy, and ultimately impact on the public's health and well-being. I'm Gregg Masters, co-host and executive producer, and I'm joined by the digital health aficionado himself, author, editor, global thought leader, and in his executive capacity, steward servant, Gil Bashe. Together, we're on a mission to bring you the people, the ideas, and the companies that are not just talking the talk, but walking the talk. On today's menu, we are in the company of Dr. Ronald Razmi, co-founder and managing director at ZOI Capital. Dr. Razmi began his career as a cardiologist and was one of the pioneers in application of MRI systems in managing cardiac patients. He built the software system cardiovascularmri.com to serve as a platform for education and training of cardiologists in using MRI in managing their patients. Dr. Razmi is a co-author of the textbook Handbook of Cardiovascular Magnetic Resonance Imaging. So with no further delay, Gil, the mic is yours.
Gregg, once again, I have to thank you for that very wonderful and gracious introduction. It's been a privilege to have you as the executive producer of Health UnaBASHed for the past 3 years. I also want to remind our listeners that Gregg has a fantastic program. His program called Pop Health Week is a must listen to, and for a very good reason. It's not just about population health. Gregg speaks as someone who's really been in the trenches of the discipline. So Gregg, thank you for everything. We have a really very special guest today, eclectic guest, a person who covers a tremendous amount of territory within the health ecosystem. I think that Dr. Ron Razmi is the right guest at the right time. He's a cardiologist by training. He did his early cardiology work, his residency, his internship at Mayo, obviously one of the top institutions of care in the United States, particularly in diagnostic care. He's looked at the health system from various sort of like spheres. He has been a CEO of a health enterprise. He actually spent some time pioneering the effective use of MRI imaging in improving cardiac care for patients who have heart disease. So he's been an inventor. He's been a leader. He's been a clinician. He's still a clinician, obviously. He's still a cardiologist. And now he's also a partner in ZOI Capital, which is a venture capital firm looking specifically at health technology and actually a very important area that's become almost jargon. But it's the devil is in the details, as they say. It's all about how the capital is applied and the value of the technology. He's looking very closely at what some call artificial intelligence. I like the term augmented intelligence. I don't know if there's anything artificial about it. Intelligence, I think it's augmenting our human capacity to think smarter, to act faster, and to be much more efficient. And he has a top book out for the business community called The AI Doctor, The Rise of Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare. It's published by Wiley, a very noted publisher. And Ron has been going around the country on a series of book tours, debates, meeting with many of our friends in conversation. And here he is right now on Health UnaBASHed. Ron, welcome to the program.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I love the show, and finally, I'm on it. So I guess I've made it.
Well, your best is yet to come. I know that from our previous conversation. You're working right now on your next book, and I hope that we'll have a few moments. I want to focus on what you're doing now, but I hope you'll spend some time giving us some teasers about what that next book is going to be all about. One of the things I find so fascinating about your background, it's not unusual to find people who know finance in venture capital. It's not even so unusual to find people who come out of medicine in venture capital in the health area. But you have a sort of a different twist to it all because you've spent time in the hospital system. You've spent time as the leader of a company for about, I think you were CEO for about 7 years.
Yes.
Something like that. you have an appreciation for what it is to be an operator, have the woes and worries of running a company. You have to make calls. You have to raise money. You have to have limited partners. You have to deploy active capital for return on investment. And that's probably sharpened your senses. I wanted to ask you like a weighted question, if I could. Now hold on to your seat a little bit. You're saying to myself, I thought this was a friendly program, and holy mackerel, the guy's going to ask me about return on investment. A lot of us write about, we talk about, we opine about AI. We talk about its ability to make us smarter, faster, its ability to help us do pattern recognition. And probably every company of note in the book has a team looking at AI right now. But you're making investments in companies that are perfecting or improving the AI system. I wanted to get some background, if you would, about your leadership thinking at ZOI Capital, which, by the way, is a Greek name, three-letter Greek name. You'll share with us what it means. But I wanted to get a little perspective from you about your due diligence process and the decision-making process and if you don't mind, we don't look at companies in AI and health that are doing this. This is our sweet spot. We're specialists. We drill down. Talk to us a little bit about how you're applying your expertise as a VC leader.
Yeah, great question. As a matter of fact, that's sort of what my book lays out is when I decided to write a book, it was really because I was looking at the use cases that were being developed and funded, and they were getting almost no traction. I write about a few hundred companies in my book, but in the final section, when I really get into the business of AI in healthcare, I couldn't find 5 that have been smashing success stories. So that's really important to keep in mind is lots of that funding hasn't resulted in products that have changed healthcare or changed anything in particular. Like, as a matter of fact, the high-flying companies like Olive, which was supposedly transforming the administrative side of healthcare, it's no longer. Babylon had a $4 billion valuation, and they're no longer. So I had to continue to edit the chapters right up till the time of the publication to go and say, now defunct Babylon, and so forth. So the book is about this topic. Anything that you talk about AI in healthcare sounds good. It's a shiny object. To the untrained eye, to the generalist investor, they're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. This is going to be a $1 billion use case. And unfortunately, for most of them, that's not the case. So part of what you see in the final chapters in the book, I actually lay out criteria for the buyers of the technologies, which are health systems and medical and providers and clinics and life science companies, and for investors and entrepreneurs to go through a series of questions and guidelines to decide, are you working on the right use case? Is anybody interested in a solution for this? A lot of times the incumbent good enough wins over a sexy, really interesting new technology, which takes money to buy, takes time to implement, it requires manpower, and it needs to fit into existing workflows. So we've actually developed scorecards, both for the use case, but also for the company itself, that we put the companies through in order to decide, are they solving a mission critical need? Have they solved for data availability? Have they solved for workflow issues? So last year we diligenced 52 companies, 2 companies made it through that process. And I think that's the 4 to 5% success rate is what you're looking at right now.
I think if I remember correctly about your background, weren't you a McKinsey consultant at one point?
Yeah, so I was a cardiologist. I went back to business school. You mentioned the MRI. MRI, when I was doing my cardiology training, I got an NIH grant. I was one of the recipients. of an NIH grant to study emerging technologies, which at the time meant digital, but digital meant nothing back then in medicine. So I got involved in technology development, and that sparked my interest to be on the entrepreneurial and the business side of healthcare. So I went back to business school, and after business school, I joined McKinsey, and I was at McKinsey for a few years doing M&A, private equity buyouts, corporate strategy, that kind of thing. And when I started my company, this is what's interesting. So here I am. I've been a cardiologist. I practiced for a couple of years. I was involved in technology development for healthcare. I've been a healthcare consultant for a reputable consulting firm. When I started my company, Acupera, and I started commercializing, we built our technology, started commercializing, I realized I knew nothing about healthcare. I was even with that background, I realized I knew very little about what it takes to bring technology, new technology into healthcare.
Just dropping in, you're right on time for Health Unabashed on Healthcare Now Radio. Today we're chatting with Dr. Ronald Razmi, co-founder and managing director at ZOI Capital and co-author of the textbook, Handbook of Cardiovascular Magnetic Resonance Imaging. Stay tuned for the rest of the story.
I understand. I was just wondering, because here you have this, again, you have you've been in hospital systems, cardiologist, business consultant with McKinsey, entrepreneurial CEO, inventor, VC specialist, author. So I wanted to ask you about something you said that I think is so critical, that I sometimes wonder if all these AI companies that are being created right now, that really they're an extension. Tough question. And you could say, I don't want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. But I wonder if they're really the development laboratories for Microsoft, Google, Epic, Apple, Amazon. In other words, are all these companies that are coming in, are they developing tools that help us improve the health system's efficiency, either clinically or economically or operationally, and maybe they're plugins really for the bigger companies to sort of sort through and look at their not the volume of their sales, but how they're doing when they are implemented within a health system. Is that sort of almost like, even though they're getting paid the pilot program for a Microsoft or another major company to swoop in and just say, hey, I think that platform within our system could be a winner. We'll just embed it in something else. Or do you really think any of these companies, AI health companies, will be like blockbuster standalones?
Well, first of all, let's remember it's the early days. One thing that we know for darn sure is Microsoft, Google, Amazon, these guys haven't had much success in health. Google has shut down Google Health several times. They bought Fitbit. Now they've folded everything under Fitbit. Amazon has, had Amazon Care. Then they bought One Medical. Yeah. Now, so you don't really have to worry about Microsoft outcompeting you if you're solving a really good problem with an interesting technology and you figured out how to get it paid for and so forth. The worst thing that can happen to you is they're going to be acquiring you, and that's going to be the end of your success. I mean, you can cash out, but they're not going to be able to do anything with that technology. I think this is wide open right now. The reason companies are not gaining a lot of traction is the barriers are low. If you have your brother-in-law that works in a medical center and can get you a bunch of radiology scans, you can develop an algorithm. You can do a retrospective study and get it through the FDA.
For Health and
Now
Abashed
you
on
have an
Healthcare
FDA-approved
Radio.
AI
Today's
and
conversation
radiology
features
application that
Dr.
helps
Sachin
radiologists
James, the CEO
find
of Scan
tumors in
Group
the
and Scan
liver
Health
or
Plan,
lung
an
or what have
influential
you.
leader serving
Unfortunately,
over 300,000 members
that
and
doesn't mean
driving over
anything.
$4.8
You haven't
billion
shown that
in
it works in the
revenue.
real
Stay
world.
with us for more
You haven't shown that it
insights.
improves patient outcomes. You haven't figured out who's going to pay for it. Is it going to be the insurance company? Is it going to be the hospital? And even if somebody signs an enterprise contract with you to provide that application to them so their radiologists could become more efficient, or they can become a center of excellence so they can attract more patients, you have to do the implementation. You need to get inside the PACS system and interface with a bunch of other databases. That means you need to wait in line, because a lot of times the manpower and the IT departments of the provider institutions is very low. They're usually maintaining their EMRs and also integrating new EMRs into the enterprise EMRs. So these types of practical issues are keeping these technologies from gaining better adoption. And if you want to be successful, you need to think through the whole value chain and solve every one of these problems so you can expediently commercialize your technology, get revenues going, gain more investments, and live to fight another day. That's really what's going on. It's not anybody keeping these technologies, any of these big players. I mean, Epic is very good at telling their customers, yeah, we're going to have that next year, and they're happy to hear it, even though it's not even on the Epic roadmap. But the other ones don't really have as much presence other than providing cloud services for providers. They don't really have a lot of presence in the provider institutions.
So I wanted to ask you, we've talked about Olive and Babylon, and obviously, Ali Parsa will, he'll reemerge. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's tasted the fire, and he'll be back. But you know what doesn't work clearly. Can you share with us a little bit of what excites you and ZOI Capital, where you are placing your bets?
Yeah, so I mentioned we saw two technologies last year that we were excited about, the teams, the technology, and these technologies were solving immediate problems. It wasn't about, we're going to, in a few years, we're going to have a cure for cancer. They were solving immediate problems without needing to extract data out of existing information systems. That's a big one. If you don't have to rely on somebody feeding you data, their output was easily digestible and solved an immediate problem. So it made everybody's life easier rather than more difficult. They were able to become a foundational technology, meaning that, for example, one of them does passive monitoring of older people in independent living facilities. So instead of using a camera or having a wearable, you can use radar or infrared indoors to keep an eye on people through AI. AI analyzing the signals. It goes in the bathroom, it goes in the living room, it goes in the bedroom, and then you can see the benefits. You can keep an eye on residents without having to check on them. You can notice change in their gait, or if they're going to the bathroom a lot, or they're staying in bed, because AI is capable of mapping their entire day. So that's a technology that has light implementation, solves an immediate problem, does not require insurance reimbursement. That's the kind of thing we get excited about, where they've solved for these obstacles that are alive and present and bring down almost every digital technologies that dares to go into healthcare.
I want to jump on something. We talked earlier before the show about the whole sense of value-based care, which is engaging people and keeping them healthy. On one hand, that's where payers want to go. That's not necessarily where hospital systems want to go. They have beds to fill. And obviously, we're fearful in rural America. We're seeing hospital closures all the time. Part of it is the economics of it all. But the whole movement or the mindset is healing and aging in place at home, and trying to, sort of like, how do we do stuff in a hospital, but get you on the next step, going home. And And even sending nurses to visit you in the course of the day is often less expensive and more focused than keeping you on the floor for 3 days. Where there's all sorts of risks. You don't get rest. The nurses are overworked. It's kind of like the gerbil cycle there, the hamster wheel. The technologies you're talking about, what do you think about the economics of people who want to age in place or heal at home? Is that feasible? Is it like it's a nice idea, it makes sense, it's just not going to happen? And where do wearables fit into all this?
Well, the technology that I mentioned is very relevant to aging in place because it can keep an eye on people without watching them with a camera. Also, with older people, we've seen wearables. No, I mean they don't keep it on. They drop it in the bathroom. It's a problem. Wearables and camera-based monitoring. So I think technology is ultimately the answer. This is one example of a technology that can make that possible. Also, one of the things about this technology is the fact that if you're noticing somebody's going to the bathroom a lot or their gait quality is worsening, you can get to them before they become symptomatic and they need to go to the hospital, right? A lot of times to keep somebody from getting into a spiral is recognizing things early and then intervening before it becomes a costly issue. So I think technology is the answer to lower costs, to make healthcare more accessible. However, it's technology that solves, its time needs to be here. It needs to be a mission critical problem where people want to spend money. It needs to solve the problem in a way where it doesn't create work for people. It plays nice with the other technologies. That's really the analysis up front. And as I mentioned in the book, I lay this out, the thinking. So to save people years from developing something that's not going to gain traction. And you have a situation where a lot of these companies are being formed by PhDs who've never practiced medicine, never been inside a hospital, but they're strong data scientists. They can get a hold of data, they can create something, and they think if you build it, they will come. If we've learned anything from the first decade of digital health is you can build it, but they'll decide if they want to come or not. And most of the times they don't.
No, you've written The AI Doctor. That's on sale right now. Wiley, people can get the book immediately, and as a result, get your investment strategy tips for the category, the good, the bad, and the here's where I recommend you go. You also have a weekly blog called AI Doctor Blog, and you write about that. Obviously, AI is a sort of a business passion of yours, and you have another book coming out right now. Tell us a snippet about that book.
That book it's not coming out, I don't think, anytime soon because we're working on it, but it's more of a macroeconomic book. I've been interested in economics since I went to business school at Kellogg, and I actually had an economic blog for a while where I write about macroeconomic issues. And the reason I'm really interested in that is all the progress you and I are talking about here is because of the Industrial Revolution and the fact that so much wealth was generated. And when you have wealth, people pay taxes and government could invest in R&D, and it takes decades of public sector R&D investment to come up with foundational technologies like AI and the internet and so forth. So we need to make sure our macroeconomic strategy is top-notch. So there is enough money to invest in R&D in the public sector, which takes decades to create these technologies. No private sector investor or company would invest in those technologies at that stage. And also making sure we're educating people so people could fill these jobs, and we have the right infrastructure to allow these technologies. So that's why I think writing about the upstream policy level decisions on economics, tax policy, and fiscal policy is the right next step for me. And I infuse a lot of those discussions and topics into AI Doctor in my blogs, but also in the book. A lot of times I write pages about macroeconomic and policy issues that would impact adoption of AI and how fast it could happen. So we can all reap the benefits if we're finding cures for cancer faster. If healthcare becomes easier and more convenient for us, then it benefits everybody in society.
You've been wonderful. I mean, Ron, cardiologist, McKinsey consultant, inventor, CEO, venture capital leader, and also I would just say information sharer on the do's and don'ts of AI. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
It's been my honor. Thank you for having me.
And that, dear listeners, is the last note for today's melody. A huge thank you to our worldwide audience for listening in. And tip of the hat to our guest, Dr. Ronald Razmi, co-founder and managing director at ZOI Capital and co-author of the textbook, quote, Handbook of Cardiovascular Magnetic Resonance Imaging. Do follow Dr. Razmi's work on the web at www.zoicap.com and on Twitter via @RRAZMI. Health Unabashed streams live 3 times a week on Healthcare Now Radio, Monday through Friday, 10:30 a.m., 6:30 p.m., and 2:30 a.m. Eastern, and that's 7:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and 11:30 p.m. Pacific. Stay social with Gil and me on Twitter via @Gil_Bashe, and that's BASHE, and Gregg Masters MPH, and that is Gregg with 2 G's. And don't forget to give your tweets some zing with our hashtag HealthUnabashed. Until we meet again, pursue your passion for better health and with no apologies.